Hello, everybody. I am the Warped Adventure. Today, we're back with another deck talk. And this deck talk is on Zedruu, the Greathearted. Now, I know what your immediate thought is fake hugs or bad hugs. But to that, I say, how could you ever think that? Because this isn't bad hugs. This is the best of hugs. I call it my nanny deck because I want someone to win the game without anyone dying. I want someone to win the game without anyone else losing the game. And so I hug people, I make people happy, I try and gain people life, I draw them cards, I just give them things and give them stuff so that way they could just live. I am a nanny and I'm going to disrupt your fights. You children need to calm down, go to your corners. I'll take that away from you. You can't have that. You're being bad with it. So, yeah, the best of hugs, the nanny. And I guess we should just get started with the more control elements of this deck. Starting with Hindering Touch. It costs 4 for counter spell. Counter target spell unless this controller pays 2 colorless. I know, a 4 cost counter spell that they could pay to get through, but it has Storm, and so it copies itself for each spell cast before it this turn. If you really want a target spell to not go through, you could put multiple targets of the Storm on one, and since it also counts your own spells, and you generally don't want to counter your own spells, then you could easily just start throwing the extra targets on each of them, make them pay 4 or 6 or 8. And it's just really clears up the stack if something dangerous is about to happen. Next up, we have Roiling Vortex. This one is a little bit of a tough add, but in the end, it's helped and it has saved games before. It costs 2 for an enchantment. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, Roiling Vortex deals 1 damage to them. Whenever a player casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast that spell, Roiling Vortex deals 5 damage to that player. And the last ability you never use, at least I don't. Pay a red, your opponents can't gain life this turn. It is there to stop Cascade decks from getting out of hand, or to stop copy decks or stuff like that. It really just helps let you control things a little easier and make sure your opponents are still enjoying their game. Because that's the end goal for this deck. I just want everyone who's playing to enjoy their game. And I love doing that in Magic, so there you go. I want them to enjoy their game, but also I want everybody else to enjoy their game. So Whirling Vortex will allow us to stand a chance against that freeze deck that's about to pop off. Next up, we have Metalindor, Swift Savior. I probably butchered that name, but you know what? Don't care. He's a 3/3 flyer. When he deals combat damage to a player, exile up to 1 target creature you own, return it to the battlefield under your control. So, if you don't know, Zedruu's ability, he's a 2/4 for 4. On your upkeep, you gain X life and draw X cards, where X is the number of permanents you own that your opponents control. And you can pay 1 red, white, and blue. Target opponent gains control of target permanent you control. So you're giving people your stuff, you're gaining life and drawing cards for it. But also, you are going to, if someone's being mean with the stuff you're giving them, you hit someone and take back the thing you gave them. They're being naughty with your gift, you take it back, and when they're being nice, they can have their toy back. Moving on, we have a similar one, Eldrazi Displacer. He's a 3/3 for 3. You can pay 3 colorless, exile another target creature, then return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. Now this one has far more uses. It if you want to retrigger ETBs, you can do that, whether it's your ETBs or opponent's ETBs, doesn't matter. Someone's being mean with the stuff you gave them, take it back, because it'll come back to you when it enters. Um, if someone's attacking someone for lethal, you can pay 3 to blink it, and they'll remove it from combat. Um, yeah. Or if one of your things are being targeted by a kill spell or whatever, pay 3, blink it, boom, loses its target. There is so much you can do with Displacer. He is so good, and the best thing is he doesn't tap to do it. And so the moment he comes out, he can start doing it. He can do it multiple times a turn. He's just unbelievably useful. Next up, we have Aspira, Supreme Judge. She costs 6 for a 6/4 flying. Whenever a creature attacks you or planeswalker you control, you may draw a card. And that was a new addition. I added her just because turns out Hug Deck gets targeted quite a bit for combat. And so drawing cards from people attacking you and making people pay to attack you ended up being really helpful for this deck. So it'll just let you live longer. Because if you're dead, you can't keep other people alive. Moving on, we have Unbreakable Formation, and that's just to avoid board wipes, which you yourself in this deck also has 3 board wipes, which is more than I normally add, but this deck likes to keep people alive, and when things hit the fan, you can board wipe to clear things up and keep the game going. In the end, I call it Nanny, but it just wants the game to not end until I can find a way to make someone win without anybody else losing. Next up, we have Sphere of Safety. Cost 5. Creatures can't attack you or a planeswalker you control unless their controller pays X colorless for each of those creatures, where X is the number of enchantments you control. This deck just so happens to have quite a few enchantments, and so I just threw that one in because it really this deck loves to have ways to protect itself from being attacked and being targeted because, well, it can't keep people alive if it's dead. Next up, Ghostly Prison. Creatures can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. No, wait. Creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays 2 colorless for each creature that's attacking you. This is a similar thing to Sphere of Safety, but not quite as helpful. Next up is Windborn Muse. It is a creature version of the Ghostly Prison. And next up is Diversionary Tactics. Tap 2 untap creatures you control, tap target creature. So if someone's about to swing out, you could tap some of your creatures down to make sure they can't attack you. And if you don't have enough creatures, you can pass Diversionary Tactics to someone else, so they can start controlling the player. This deck loves to make deals. It is like the deck that I make the most deals with because it's always helping people, and so if you can get deals out of that, it's extremely helpful because it needs to stay alive to do stuff. Now this stuff is in here mainly to help the deck itself, which may sound weird, but most stuff in here is not to help you. It's most stuff in here is either, well, to keep yourself alive, so I guess sort of, but or the rest of the stuff that's in here is to keep everyone else alive and try and find a way to end the game without anybody losing. And so this stuff is the stuff that's in here to give yourself a little bit of a boost. First up, you have Lost Oromancers, 3/3 with Vanishing 3. Comes into when it's put into the graveyard from play, if it had no time counters on it, search your library for enchantment card, put into play. If you do, shuffle. Oh, that's the May ability. But yeah, like I said, you end up having a lot of enchantments. So if If you need to, you can get that Sphere Safety or Diversionary Tactics or Citadel Siege or any of the really nice enchantments in here that could help you out. Next up, you have Kaikar Wind's Fury. He's a 3/3 flying for 4. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create a 1/1 white spirit creature token flying, and you can sacrifice the spirit to add 1 red to your mana pool. A little bit of ramp, little bit of tokens, and you cast quite a few non-creature spells in this deck, so it's helpful. Next up, you have Decree of Justice. You can cycle it for 3, discard card, draw a card. Well, discard this card to draw a card. And when you cycle it, you can pay X. If you do, you get that many 1/1 white soldiers. But it costs 4 and double X, and you get X 4/4 white angel creature tokens with flying. So double X means for every one, in this case, every 1 angel you want, you have to pay 2. It's still really nice in this deck, so that way you can build up a fleet of angels to protect yourself. Believe it or not, this deck needs to protect itself. Generally, you won't be swinging with those angels, but you can protect yourself, or you can start passing them around to help other people protect themselves. Now for with stuff similar to that, White Sun Zenith, pay 3 white, X colors, get that many 2/2 cats. And then shuffle White Sun Zenith to its owner's library. Then you have Starnheim Unleashed, which is a better version of the Decree of Justice. Cost 4 white. You get a 4/4 white angel creature token of flying and vigilance. If it was foretold, create X instead. So you pay 2 colors and put it into exile and cast it later for its foretell cost. So if you cast it foretold, it costs 1 white and double X. And so that just means it costs 3 less mana that won't count towards the X. And that's why it's so much better, because you get at least an additional 1 angel or 2 angels. Depends on how much extra mana you have. Next up, we have Finale of Glory. 2 white, X colorless, create X, 2/2 white soldier creature tokens with vigilance. If X is 10 or more, also create X 4/4 white angel creature tokens with flying and vigilance. That is amazing. If you put 12 mana into it, which is quite a bit, you get 10 2/2 white soldiers with Vigi and 10 4/4 flying angels with Vigi. And that's 60 power on board for paying 12. And 40 of that power will be in the air. And none of it will tap down to attack. That is super good. Help you live through a heavy swing. It could help you if the player has already died, then the main goal of the deck is over, and it turns into trying to win in a funny way or a fun way. And Finale of Glory is an exceptionally fun way to win. So, could be a win con. Generally, it's not, because it's hard to have 12 mana. Next up is Keeper of the Accord. Pretty obvious ad. 3/4/4. On each opponent's end step, if that player has more creatures than you, you get a 1/1 white soldier. And if at the beginning of each opponent's end step, if they have more lands than you, fetch a basic plains, put it on the battlefield, tapped, and shuffle. So it can ramp you if you're running low on lands and give you tokens if you're running low on creatures. Super helpful. Triggers on each of your opponent's end steps, so it's amazing. Next up, we have Archivist of Ogma. It's a 2/2 flash for 2. Whenever an opponent searches their library, you gain 1 life and draw a card. So that's just really nice because, well, people tend to search their libraries a lot, so you want to draw yourself extra cards and gain yourself some extra life. Try and outlive your opponents. The fun stuff. Next up, we have Platoon Dispenser. It's a 4/6 for 5. At the beginning of your end step, if you control 2 or more other creatures, draw a card. You can pay 4 to create a colorless soldier artifact creature token. It has Unearth for 4. That's in there for extra card draw and create you some soldiers if you really need it. And it's a pretty good blocker, so really nice. And we got Valkyrie Harbinger. 4/5 flying lifelink. At the beginning of each end step, if you gained 4 or more life this turn, create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying and vigilance. And you tend to gain quite a bit of life in this deck, so you can easily get to that mark. Moving on, we have the life gain stuff that is meant for you. Staff of the Sun Magus, cast a white spell or play a plane to gain a life. Kraken's Eye, whenever a player casts a blue spell, you gain a life. War Report, gain life equal number of creatures and artifacts on the battlefield, and artifact creatures count for 2. Wall of Revenants, 4 for a 1/6 defender flying. At the beginning of your end step, gain life equal power target creature you control. You can also give that to another player if they're running low on life but have a big creature to start gaining them life. And Clear Water Goblet, cost 5. Sunburst comes into play with a charge counter for each mana used to pay its cost, for each color of mana used to pay its cost. So in this deck, that'll be generally 3, but you might end up having treasures, so it could be 5. Keep that in mind. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may gain 1 life for each charge counter on Clear Water Goblet. So could be anywhere from gaining 1 life on your upkeep to gaining 5 life on your upkeep. Which if it's 5, then or even if it's just 3, Zedruu, if you gave someone else one of your things, will gain you that extra life. And every turn, Valkyrie Harbinger will be giving you a 4/4. First up on the Hug cards that aren't necessarily to keep your opponents alive, but just to make them happy, you have Cutthroat Negotiator. It's 4 for a 4/3. Whenever it attacks, each player reveals the top card of their library. For each non-land card revealed this way, you create a tapped treasure token. Then each player draws a card. It gives you mana. It draws everyone cards. The main thing is drawing everyone cards, but having that extra mana is really nice for Zedruu. Because it is quite the mana heavy deck for all the abilities you activate and such. So it's nice to have the extra ways of creating treasure. Next up, we have Thopter Assembly. It's 6 for 5/5 flying. And on your upkeep, if you control no Thopters other than Thopter Assembly, return Thopter Assembly to its owner's hand and create 5 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature tokens with flying. So you yourself can create the Thopters and then play it again and pass it to someone else so they get the Thopters and just start giving everyone Thopters. Next up, we have Tempt with Glory. Cost 6, tempting offer. Put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. Then, each opponent may put a 1/1 counter on each creature he or she controls. For each opponent who does, put another 1/1 counter on each creature you control. So if everyone puts a 1/1 counter on all their creatures, you end up having 4 1/1 counters put on all your creatures for this spell. And it helps your opponents too. So it's really fun. However, playing it may make you look like a bigger threat than you are, so keep that in mind. Next up, we have Genesis Chamber. Whenever a non-token creature ETBs, if Genesis Chamber is untapped, that creature's controller creates a 1/1 colorless mirror artifact creature token. So basically, make everyone some mirror, make everyone happy, give them a bunch of chump blockers, and yeah, keep them alive longer, make them happier, give them creatures, so fun. Next up, we have Barbed Shocker. 4 for a 2/2 trample haste. May seem like a weird ad, but Whenever it deals combat damage, whenever it deals damage to a player, that player discards all cards in their hand, then draws that many cards. This card I don't generally use unless people want new hands, because then I can just start giving them new hands, and that's always fun. And so I poke them for 2, and they draw a bunch of new cards, pitching their old cards. But if no one wants the hand, I generally don't poke people, even if I could. Next up, we have Folio of Fancies. Players have no maximum hand size. Pay double X, tap. Each player draws X cards. So pay 2 for each card you want people to draw. And the final ability I won't mention because I never use it. Next up, we have Hithlane Rope. Can't be sacrificed, and you can pay colors, tap, search your library for basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, tapped, then shuffle. The player to your right gains control of Hithlane Rope. So it can ramp you and you pass it off. So Zedruu will gain you life and draw a card on your upkeep as it's passed around, opposite of turn order. Keep that in mind. Or you can pay 2 colors, tap, draw a card. The player to your right gains control of Hithlane Rope. I have another card like that in this deck, and it's just really nice. Helps everyone at the table. If they need more mana, they can ramp. If they just want an extra card, they could draw a card. Super nice. Next up, Buckenard's Ever Full Purse. 1 colors, tap, roll a d4, and create that many treasures. The player to your right gains control of Buckenard's Ever Full Purse. So, again, it gives you some treasures. You pass it off to another player. You don't have to pay the 3 to pass it off. Instead, you just pay 1 to pass it off and gives you money back. And Zedruu will gain you life and draw you cards for it. Everyone else will like you for even playing it. So yeah. Next up, we have Mana Flare. Cost 3 for an enchantment. Whenever a player taps a land for mana, that player adds 1 mana, adds 1 mana of that land, of any type that land produced. Sorry, that was confusing. So you double everybody's land mana. Not their mana from artifacts or anything, but all mana that they get from lands will be doubled. Next up is Spurn Mage Advocate. It's 1 white for 1/1. Tap, return 2 target cards in an opponent's graveyard to his or her hand, then destroy target attacking creature. There is so much use to this card in this deck. You could give people back their cards, be super cool with it, and take out a big threat that's swinging at someone. And just having it out there is a threat because everyone sees it's there and is like, well, I can't attack because he could just take it out. And so it really slows down the amount your opponents attack and with what they attack with. Granted, it will probably be targeted, so keep that in mind. Then we have Lauren of the Third Path. Cost 3 for a 2/1 Vigi. When she enters the battlefield, destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment. So enters the battlefield can remove some threat that's being an issue. And tap, you and target opponent each draw a card. So again, more card draw for your opponents and yourself. So that's super nice. Next up is Pyxis of Pandemonium. I love this card. It is so chaotic, over the top, and when you just use it, you're like, let chaos reign. But costs 1 colorless. Tap. Each player exiles the top card of his or her library face down, so you can't look at it. Nobody can. Then you can pay 7 colorless. Tap and sack Pyxis of Pandemonium. Each player turns face up all cards he or she owns exiled with Pyxis of Pandemonium, then puts all permanent cards from among them onto the battlefield. I easily get this on turn 1 and just use it every turn, and then I'll pass it off to someone else so they have to use their mana to sacrifice it because they want what's in their exile, but I really don't feel like paying the 7. So they get to pay the 7, everyone gets what they want, And they're not really mad at me still because they just got a field full of stuff. But you can also control your opponent's resources with it because everyone wants what to have in exile because they don't know what it is because it's all face down. And so they're willing to pay that 7 to get it all. And so you just pass it off to someone else, maybe the next person's turn. So you pass it off to the person on the left, and then do your turn as normal. And then let chaos reign, as they say. Next up, we have Benevolent Offering. Pretty obvious one. Cost 4. Choose an opponent. You and that player each put 3/1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying onto the battlefield. And choose an opponent. You gain 2 life for each creature you control, and that player gains 2 life for each creature he or she controls. So if you're trying to get someone to you give someone blockers, maybe give another person some life, or give the same person both, and you still get all the nice stuff yourself as well. So it's always nice. Next up, you have Cut a Deal. Each opponent draws a card. You draw a card for each opponent who drew a card this way. Pretty obvious. Next up, we have Ramp. There's only 2 in here. This deck probably needs more mana rocks and such, but there's just so many things I wanted to add that I ended up only having 2. So Chromatic Lantern is a 3-color deck, so mana color fixing can help. But also, if you're having no issues with mana and color, you can pass it off to someone who is, or needs a little bit extra mana, you can pass it off to them, and boom. This deck just wants people to enjoy their game. So, having that in there makes sense. Helps yourself, and if you don't need it, helps someone else. And Invasion of Segovia. When this battle enters play, you get 2/1/1 blue Krakens with trample, and has 4 defense counters, and its other side is a 3/3 Serpent. The Chaos Sea Tyrant of Segovia. Non-creature spells you cast have Convoke. Your creatures can help cast it. And on your end step, untap up to 4 target creatures. Doesn't have to be your own creatures, notably. Next up, we have ways that are specifically in this deck to keep people alive longer. Let's start with the less notable ways and move on from there. So first up, we have Reward the Faithful. Any number of target players each gain life equal to the highest converted mana cost among permanents you control. Just gain everybody a little bit of life for 1. Super nice. Next up is Moment of Silence. 1 white, target player skips his or her combat phase this turn. So, gives you a little bit of extra time before that player swings out for game. And that could be all you need. Next up, Citadel Siege. Cost 4. As it enters, choose cons or dragons. Cons, beginning combat, put 2/1/1 counters target creature you control. If you want to do that, you can pass it off to someone else if you really want. Or dragons, which is what you're going to be choosing most. At the beginning of combat, on each opponent's turn, tap target creature that player controls. That's an obvious one. Next up, we have Archetype of Aggression. 3 for a 3/2. Creatures you control have trample. You don't care. But creatures your opponents control lose trample and can't have or gain trample. And so it just lets everyone chump block without worrying about trample. It's so good. And with your Eldrazi Displacer, you can just go to destroy it, blink it. Keep in mind, blinking does not get around board wipes because board wipes don't target. They won't lose their target and fizzle. They'll just be like, okay, welcome back. Now get blown up. Anyways, that's off topic. Yeah, take away everybody's trample. Let everyone chump block. Everyone loves it. Not really. This deck is actually like nobody wants to face it because it's really good at not letting people die. Next up is Windshaper Planetar. Cost 5 for a 4/4 flash flying. When it enters the battlefield during the declare attackers step, for each attacking creature, you may reselect which player or planeswalker that creature is attacking. So, someone's about to swing out for game to kill someone else, like with everything they have, just either blink Windshaper Planetar during their after they declared their attackers, or cast him and just spread the attackers out so everyone lives. Well, this feels like a good transition. Speaking of everyone lives, everybody lives. It's a 2-cost instant. All creatures gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Players gain hexproof until end of turn. Players can't lose life this turn, and players can't lose or win the game this turn. In other words, uh, someone's about to win, cast Everybody Lives. Now they can't. This card came out in the Doctor Who decks, and bro, it's perfect for this deck. It is what this deck wants. This is the card for this deck. Everybody Lives. Next up, Arbiter of Null Ridge. This one's probably my favorite way to keep everyone alive. Combo it with Eldrazi Displacer, and it is just such a grind to try and win. It is 7 costs for a 5/5 Vigi. When it enters the battlefield, each player's life total becomes the highest life total among all players. In other words, you just keep blinking it, and everyone's life total, let's say someone has, like, you have 60 life, let's say. Just keep blinking it, and everyone's life total will stay at 60. And they're just gonna have a hard time killing people. So, next up, we have the odd cards, I'll call them. I wasn't sure where to put them, but they fit in the deck quite well. I just don't know I don't know what else to call. First up, we have the 11th Doctor. He's a 3/2 for 3. He has I Am Talking. Whenever the 11th Doctor deals combat damage to a player, you may exile a card from your hand with a number of time counters on it equal to its mana value. If it doesn't have Suspend, it gains Suspend. 2 colors, target creature with power 3 or less can't be blocked this turn. So basically, he's in there for when you just don't have enough mana to cast all your stuff. You could just start poking people for a little bit of damage to suspend one of your expensive cards for later, and then heal the opponent up later for the damage you dealt them. Next up, we have Mimic Vat. 3 colors. Whenever a non-token creature dies, you may exile that card. If you do, return each other card exiled with Mimic Vat to its owner's graveyard. Excuse me. And then you can pay 3 colors, tap, create a token that's a copy of a card exiled with Mimic Vat. It gains haste, exile it at the beginning of the next end step. So basically, it's whenever anyone's stuff dies, you can choose to exile it and start being able to make copies of it. Notably, you don't have to change out the one you have exiled right now. You can choose to, so it doesn't keep switching out uncontrollably. So it's not pure chaos. And it's nice because you can pass it off to someone else. Like, you pay the 3 to get your token, and you pass it off to someone else, the next person in turn order probably, or the person to the right. That way you, yeah. Anyways, and they can get the tokens as well. It's nice. Has a few different ways it can help the deck. Moving on, we have Mithril Coat. Cost 3, flash, indestructible. When it enters the battlefield, attach it to target legendary creature you control. Equipped creature has indestructible, and it has equipped for 3. It's in here because the board gets wiped a lot, and things get killed a lot. So if someone's trying to kill Zedruu for some reason, or something like that, you just flash it in, enters, equipped to Zedruu, let the board wipe. Or the kill spell doesn't kill him. It doesn't get around exile, and it doesn't get around -1/-1 counters. You get the drill. Next up is Invasion of Theros. When it enters battlefield, search your library for an aura, god, or demigod card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. That part's not bad. Basically, every time you're probably going to be searching for. Okay, I edited this deck recently, and there was a god and a demigod in this deck before. Seems they've been taken out, so I'm gonna need to add a god or a demigod in. Probably a demigod. I don't have that many gods. But yeah, that's not the main reason he's in here. This is in here anyway. The main reason, the other side, it has 4 defense counters, like most battles do. The other side is Ephra, Ever Sheltering. She has lifelink and indestructible, as long as you control at least 3 other enchantments. And whenever another enchantment ETB is under your control, draw a card. Again, there's a surprising amount of enchantments in here, and so being able to draw the extra cards and gain some life and have a indestructible blocker is extremely nice. Next up, you have C Double. Cost 4, can't be copied. Choose one. If an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard, you may choose both. Copy target spell. You may choose new targets for the copy, or create a tokenless copy of target creature. That's super nice because obvious reasons, really. You can get out that really nice thing your opponent has, and yeah, if someone's about to do a one-sided board wipe, you could cast it and copy it, so that way it just hits everybody instead of just everyone else. So yeah, it's in there because fun shenanigans, and I feel like that's a good enough reason. Next up, we have Quintorius Loremaster. Cost 5 for a 3/5 Vigilance. At the beginning of your end step, exile target non-creature non-land card from your graveyard. Create a 3/2 red and white spirit creature token. You can pay 3, tap, sacrifice a spirit. Choose target card exiled with Quintorius. You may cast that card this turn without paying its mana cost. If that card would be put into a graveyard, put it on the bottom of its owner's library instead. I love that he doesn't exile it, and I love that he doesn't put it, just let it go to the graveyard. Because that is a perfect balance. Because when it exiles it, you never will see it again. But just throwing it back to the bottom, you won't see it for a while, but it's still able to be used again. And being able to cast Cut a Deal again, or Everybody Lives again, is really nice. Also, keep in mind, that can be done at instant speed. So yeah. Next up, we have Zedruu the Dawnwaker. This is like my favorite art of all time. It's just gorgeous. Look at that foxy. Foxes are like one of my favorite animals. Somewhere below wolves. So there you go. But also, it's a 3/3. Sorry, she is a 3/3. And activate abilities you activate that aren't mana abilities cost 2 colorless less to activate. This effect can't reduce the mana in that cost to less than 1 mana. You can pay colorless tap, target creature can't block this turn. She's in there because, like I've said before, there is a lot of activated abilities in this, and so cheapening them is amazing. And also, like I said, favorite art in all of Magic. Now we have Haunting Imitation on my Now we have the fun stuff to give the fun ways to give your opponents things. Haunting Imitation costs 3. Each player reveals top card of their library. For each creature card revealed this way, create a tokenless copy of that card, except it's a 1/1 spirit in addition to its other types, and it has flying. No creature cards were revealed this way. Return Haunting Imitation to its owner's hand. I love it. You can copy your opponent's stuff and start giving other people the copy of your opponent's thing. It's just hilarious to be like, yeah, I'm gonna copy that and then give you the copy. It's amazing. But I feel like this is even more funny. You have Atali Primal Storm. He's a 6/6 for 6. Whenever he attacks, exile the top card of each player's library. You may cast any number of spells from among those cards without paying their mana costs. So you take all your opponent's stuff and start giving those cards to other people. You don't actually need to keep the stuff you're getting. You use Zedruu to give them to other people. It's amazing. Keep in mind, you don't own those cards, so Zedruu won't draw you cards and gain you life from these. But you do technically own the Haunting Imitations, so you will do it for that. And then a more obvious way of doing the Atali funny is a wrong turn. It costs 3 for an instant. Target opponent gains control of target creature. If an attacking or blocking creature changes controllers, it's removed from combat. So I feel like it's obvious why that's hilarious. Someone's attacking you with a massive creature. In response, you say, that's actually their creature now. It's hilarious. It's great. Moving on to removal. There is one removal spell in this deck. At least one straight up removal spell. And it is Swords to Plowshares. Exile target creature. Its controller gains life equal to its power. Yeah. I don't have that many removal spells in here just because, well, it's not really focused on that. I might add more. But speaking of removal, moving on to board wipes. Like I said, there are 3 of them. Let's start with the more boring ones and move from there. Supreme Verdict. Can't be countered. Destroy all creatures. Cost 4. Next up, you have Urza's Ruinous Blast. Can't be cast unless you control a legendary creature or planeswalker. You almost always have Zedruu out. So there you go. Cost 5. Exile all non-land permanents that aren't legendary. You control quite a few legendary permanents, so you will keep quite a few of your stuff and clear up the board quite a bit. It's really nice. And then Hurkyl's Final Meditation. Costs 7. It costs 3 more if it's not your turn. So if you're doing it on somebody else's turn, costs 10. Return all non-land permanents to their owner's hands. End the turn. I've already talked about End the Turn on Deck Talk before. I've already talked about this card specifically on Deck Talk, and that was in my Reality Chip Deck Talk. But again, I love this one. And a thing to note is each one of these is a board wipe in a different way. You have Supreme Verdict to just straight up destroy all creatures. You have Urza's Ruinous Blast to exile all non-land permanents that aren't legendary. So you have Destroy, you have Exile, and Hurkyl's returns to hand. And so you got choices. Well, choices. Depends on what you draw, of course. But if you need a way to permanently get rid of stuff, then Urza's Ruinous Blast is best at it. But it is a sorcery, and it's a legendary sorcery, so you need that legendary out. If you need something to really blow someone specifically out of the game while slowing everyone down, Hurkyl's Final Meditation is really good at that. And if you just need a straight up board wipe, Supreme Verdict is good at that, and it can't be countered. So if you're worried about someone holding up a counter spell for a board wipe, Supreme Verdict is there for you to cover your butt. And finally, the win cons. There is 3 win cons in here. Let's start with the most boring one and move from there. First up, we have Storm Herd. It costs 10. Create X11 white Pegasus creature tokens with flying, where X is your life total. That's obvious. This deck gains a whole lot of life. You just dump out a crap ton of flyers, and you have blockers for days until it gets back to your turn. And if you're looking to just end the game by punching everyone, there you go. Next up, we have Over the Top. I consider this uh, a game ender because every time you play it, it it just the game ends soon after. It costs 7. Each player reveals a number of cards from the top of their library equal to the number of non-land permanents they control. Put all permanent cards they revealed this way onto the battlefield. The rest go to the graveyard. So yeah, you just everyone dumps a whole bunch of stuff onto their board. They basically double their board state as long as they hit all non-land permanents. Well, as long as they hit all permanents, which doubtful, but still, that is absurd. Next up is Feldier Sovereign. 4/6 for 6, Vigilance Lifelink. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 40 more life, you win the game. I know what you're thinking. Come on, that's such a boring way to win. But here's the thing. What I love to do with Feldier Sovereign is I try and make it look like I'm going to try and win with it. When someone inevitably tries to remove it before it gets to my turn, or if someone lowers my life total below 40, I'll pass it off to someone else or something like that and make someone else win the game with Feldier Sovereign. And I'll do my best to make sure they win the game. That's why I love this deck, is you can pick and choose who wins. And you're not really playing to win. You're playing for someone to win. And finally, we'll do lands. I run 36 lands in this deck with just one non-basic land. May seem weird, but I don't care. It's an obvious one. Miku Koro, Center of the Sea. Taps for a colorless. It's a legendary land. 2 colors, tap, each player draws a card. Pretty simple. It's super nice to give everyone card draw. And yeah, this is my Zedruu the Nanny deck. Zedruu the Great Nanny. Zedruu the Santa Goat. As people call him Santa Goat. I call him Zedruu the Great Nanny, or Zedruu the Nanny, or Grandma Zedruu, or Grandpa Zedruu. You know, you have a whole bunch of funny names you can call him. Go wild. Go hog wild. Go Minotaur wild. It bothers me. Zedruu is a Minotaur. Look at that. I thought he was a goat. And I was gonna build a goat deck with him leading it, but he's a Minotaur. Yes, that's how my brain works. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, consider subscribing. If you didn't, well, I'm sorry. I hope you enjoy the next one, or I hope you have a great night. Now, stay safe, stay healthy. Peace out.